Pittsburgh Steeler fans, what is going on? This is Jeff Hartman, the co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, with you for another episode of the Steelers Preview. That's right, the Thursday night show live on our YouTube channel. In case you're listening in audio platform, we're live on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search BTSC Steelers Radio, and follow us there. And every single Thursday, you have the same crew joining me, Bryan Anthony Davis. How's it going, Mr. Podcast Producer, Mr. PP?
Hey, yo, I'm feeling good. We had a game this week already. We've got another one. You guys are laughing at me. My mic I don't sound like James Earl Jones.
Much better. /
Buffalo Bill / Frank the Tank. So I'm back and I've figured that part out. So, I'm ready to go, ready to be busting some Broncos.
There you go. Dave Schofield, the other co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. What's up, Dave?
Hey, not much. I'm just very happy that the PP feels good. That's always a positive thing. And
that's the goal, my friend.
Yeah, so
don't have to be 2 a.m. for that.
There we go. I'm kind of disappointed, because the Thursday night game's going on. But, we should be celebrating. This is a very big football event that we are, very important thing that we're missing right now. And that's the debut of Terry Bradshaw's show on the E! Network, which I said to my wife, I'm like, why would they put that on when there's football on? I don't get it.
It's probably more entertaining than a Bengals versus Browns game. That's why.
True.
Well, it's not geared towards us, guys. It's geared to our wives, really. I mean, that's who's going to be watching it. And hey, let me ask you a question real quick. Are Bradshaw's girls are all over 18, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are.
I'm not even going there. I'm not even going there.
Okay. All right, let's get this show on the road.
Just ask.
Let's get on the road and out of the gutter. So if you're looking for any type of replay or review of last week, you're not going to get it on this show. We have completely turned the page on the preview. We're looking ahead at the next opponent. And so in week 2, the Pittsburgh Steelers host their first home game at Heinz Field. No fans in the whole month of September. The Denver Broncos come to town. The Denver Broncos are, for me at least, a very memorable team in Steelers history. There's a lot of memorable games against the Denver Broncos, but I wanted to ask you all, and I did this kind of last year. I didn't do it last week. Totally forgot. What's your most memorable Steelers Broncos moment? Dave, we'll start with you. Think of one. If you can't, throw it to Bryan. I know he probably has.
No, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. Just a moment. It was pre-game, the first year that I had season tickets when I was not at the game, but that was when Peyton Manning came to town, and my sister was like, I want to go see Peyton Manning. I had seen Peyton Manning play before when he was with the Colts, and I saw him play in Washington. So I'm like, you guys go to that game. But I actually snagged a single front row seat to that game. And I was going to go, but then I let my brother-in-law have that seat so he could go, and my sister and their son. And they went, and it was in front row, end zone, closed end, visiting side. They made a Peyton Manning sign about being a Steeler fan, but that loved Peyton Manning. And because he wasn't playing in the game, he came over and signed their sign.
That's awesome.
And they ended up on NFL Network on TV of him signing the sign. So I know that's not what you were looking for, but when I hear Denver Broncos and Pittsburgh Steelers, that's always what goes in my head.
It's a good story. It's a good story. That's what you think of. That's fine. Before I forget, Crazy
and
Chris.
The Steelers won.
There you go. Crazy Chris puts $1.99 in the tip jar. Says, hey, BTSC, it's nice seeing the gang all together. Nice seeing you again, Chris. Welcome back if you're taking a sabbatical. Bryan Anthony Davis, you think Steelers, you think Broncos, you think what?
There are so many things that I think of with this rivalry, and it is a rivalry. I really got to look at, 2006, January of 2006, when the Steelers finally got back to the Super Bowl. And that moment really when Hines Ward caught the ball in the end zone and in the middle of that game. It wasn't the end of the game, but that's when you really knew that they had something going, and there was nothing stopping this train to Detroit.
Yeah. Thought that pass was picked off, by the way. He kind of threw that on the run, and that was a good game. That was what I was going to say. but I had a backup. And to be honest with you, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Bryan, it probably would have been 2016, but I guess it was the 2015 season. Was that not the crazy wild card win in Cincinnati? And then you followed up by going to Denver, the beat up. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger can barely throw. His shoulders, they're having to shoot it up before the game just so he can throw. No Antonio Brown. He had a concussion. Thank you, Vontaze Burfict. Just so banged up. That was Martavis Bryant had a good game. But that was the Tucson fumble. That was the Fitzgerald Tucson. They were this close that close from just pulling off what a tremendous upset that would have been. And there's a lot of heartache at Mile High too. I mean, you think about the Tebow game. That was disastrous in a lot of ways. I think about the last time they played in Denver. That was the same game where Chris Boswell threw the touchdown pass to Alejandro Villanueva, but Philip Lindsay, who we'll talk about today, he gashed them big time in that game. It was really, really crazy when you think about this team. And then, what is it, Bryan, 98? Was that not an AFC championship game between the Broncos and Steelers?
Yeah, and I was there.
Ugh, that was a horrible game.
Yeah,
that was bad. That was a bad one.
Cordell threw way too many interceptions. They could have. I mean, they really had that game where, I mean, he threw 3 interceptions, a couple in the end zone. It was just absolutely ridiculous. The Broncos are one team that have owned the Steelers. Now, when you look at head-to-head records, you're always going to see the Bears, the Redskins, the Washington football team, the Giants, the Packers. They're all I'm not the Cardinals anymore, but they're all going to have, historical records so much better. But that's because of everything that happened before the merger. When you look at the Broncos and Steelers, the Broncos are 20-11-1 head-to-head. So the Steelers are 9 games below 500 against the Broncos. And there have been a lot of heartache, even in Pittsburgh as well. There have been a couple great games that, I almost went with 1984 because I always talk about 1984. That's one of my favorite Steelers-Broncos games. And the game Dave talked about was awesome as well in 2015 against the no-fly zone. But Denver's always kind of had their number.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting game here in week 2 because both teams, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, is it normal for, I just have never, I can't remember, and this is not, it doesn't mean it's never happened, or at least in my recent memory. I mean, it seems kind of crazy that the Steelers obviously working on a short week, and so are the Broncos. It always seems like there's kind of an advantage. Is that normal for that to happen, or is that just the way the schedule played out?
The only way you can do it is in week 2. That's the only way it can happen.
Yeah.
Because there's usually there's not usually 2 Monday night games, and you're not playing the same team back to back.
But I don't think this happens very often, though, does it?
I can't remember if they've done that before. Because something that does stick out in my mind is the NFL has also gotten into a tendency of the Thursday night game the week after Thanksgiving is 2 teams that also played on Thanksgiving. So they kind of had back-to-back Thursdays. They do some things like that where if they can, they match some of these things up. But I'd have to go back and research that one. Hey, I already researched and can answer the question you asked about in your Let's Ride. You didn't ask me that one in there. So
what's that? I forget what I asked.
Oh, that was about having 2 defensive front players.
Oh, the 2 front seven having interceptions in a game. You found that stat?
Yeah, I did.
Is that the trivia tonight?
I have enough other stuff that doesn't have to be.
Well, what's the answer then?
Okay. Well, now this was just the Steelers.
Well, preface the. I'll preface it while you look it up. So
I have it right here.
Okay, on my Let's Ride morning podcast, which you haven't listened to, you need to because it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 30 minutes long. I said how crazy it was that the Steelers' 2 takeaways on Monday night were from T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward. 2 players that are front 7 guys that you would not think. I said, when was the last time that happened? So Dave looks it up. When was the last time that happened?
I have it split into categories. Okay. The most recent time it happened, technically you could count this in 2002 because Joey Porter had 2 interceptions in a game. So it wasn't 2 different players, but it was 2 interceptions.
Okay.
So, but there's a reason I threw that one in there because you're going to like this where it comes later. When it was 2 different players, it was 1992 in week 3. But it was 2 outside linebackers. It was Greg Lloyd and Gerald Williams.
Okay.
But then if you want to go back to where it was a defensive lineman and an outside linebacker, 1990, week 13, in a loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. It was Keith Willis and Greg Lloyd each had an interception.
Wow.
So, but
That's incredible.
What's crazy is if you look at just defensive linemen for the Steelers that have had interceptions in their career. Only one of them went for a touchdown.
Brett Kiesel,
79
against
yards
Tampa
against
Bay.
Tampa. That's correct. But there is actually a player on the Pittsburgh Steelers that was a defensive lineman that had 2 interceptions in a game, and he did it twice.
He's on the Steelers now?
No.
Oh,
ever.
okay. I was gonna say
This is since the merger.
Since the
I
merger.
bet you Bryan knows that one.
Go ahead,
Although
Bryan.
If it's a defensive lineman, I'm thinking, LC Greenwood.
Good guess, but because of what the Steelers were doing, they considered Dwight White as part of the defensive line.
Okay.
So Dwight White had 2 interceptions. Let's see, it was against Houston in 77, and he had 2 interceptions in 73 against Oakland. And it's funny, out of all the defensive linemen for the Steelers that have ever had an interception, the only game where the Steelers lost was that one I talked about with Keith Willis, where he had one along with Greg Lloyd. So that answers your question. Moving on.
Yeah.
So your other question was, now what was the new one I got to figure out?
I forget.
Because Bryan was going to answer it.
No. I remember
What
it
it was.
It was the Monday night thing.
I actually had an answer for just a little bit. Not the complete one, but then we got off on this. But the Ravens are actually playing back-to-back Thursday night games this year because of the Thanksgiving game against Pittsburgh and the next week against Dallas.
And see, once again, they did 2 teams that were playing on Thanksgiving, also meeting on a Thursday the next week. So, yeah, that's kind of the formula they've taken.
Yeah. Well, hey, it makes sense. So, anyways, let's come all the way back around the track, and we're talking about the Steelers and the Broncos. There's no competitive advantage. They're both playing on short weeks. Pittsburgh had to travel in week 1. Denver was at home. Denver has to travel in week 2. Pittsburgh's at home, and they are both riddled with injuries. Riddled with injuries. Now, if you were like me, like Dave and I and Bryan, we're all on a Slack channel for the entire BTSC group, but Dave and I are messaging each other nonstop throughout the day to make sure we're all up on top of things, and we're making sure that we are handling the breaking news the best we can. And so whenever the injury report comes out, we message each other like an image of the injury report. And I saw Wednesday's injury report. I had a little mini heart attack. I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these players. This is insane. What is going on? Last week, there were 2. Deontay Johnson on Wednesday, and then he disappeared. And then David DeCastro, who obviously missed the game. And now they have what? Dave, was it 10?
It was 10 on Wednesday.
And that included the 2 coaches' decisions of Pouncey and Roethlisberger.
And it also included Zach Banner because they had not made the roster move yet.
But they did.
So,
they eventually did.
They did. After practice was when that was announced. But I said in the article, don't flip out because it was going from Monday to Wednesday. Anyone that had anything, they were going to sit. There was no reason to rush back that fast. So,
and I said that on the podcast as well, the injury report podcast. I was like, look, if Juju Smith-Schuster went down on the turf hard and his knees just like, man, my knee's just sore, they're going to give him a day off and they're going to label it as a knee. But so then all of a sudden, Thursday rolls around and everyone can decompress a little bit, but there's still some cause for concern. Dave, why don't you run down the injury list as we know, because this is being recorded Thursday night. Yes. So if you're listening on Friday and it's not the final designation, but Dave, what is it right now?
Yes, it is now 9 players because Zach Banner has officially been removed. There was nobody added, so that's positive.
Yep.
And 7 players came back as full participants. The only 2 who did not practice, and what stinks is because they both play the same position, was David DeCastro and Stephan Wisniewski. So Ben Roethlisberger and Marquise Pouncey, back. Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, back. Stephan Tuitt, back. Alejandro Villanueva from illness, back. I was surprised James Conner was back. I had actually figured he would be either limited or not practice. So that wouldn't surprise me. So that's good. So it looks like they're going to have everyone, but in one extremely key position.
Yeah. So Bryan, let's talk about this. This is the headline of the title of this podcast, and that is, can the Steelers patchwork line pull things together and do enough to win the game on Sunday. And I say patchwork because if you look at the right side of the line, boy, is it going to be green, because you're going to let's be honest. Wisniewski's not going to play. DeCastro's not going to play. Kevin Dotson's going to start at right guard. I would be absolutely stunned if he doesn't. Go ahead, Dave. What are you going to say?
I think you're correct that Dotson's going to start. But if Wisniewski is somewhat available, if he could maybe practice either limited or full tomorrow, I don't think he starts. Okay. But I could see them keeping him there as a reserve because they don't have another guard. So
can't J.C. Hassenauer play guard though? Didn't Bryan?
That's a good question.
Yes,
he said that he can switch.
So he would be responsible for all those positions.
Yes.
And everyone that they have on the practice squad is technically a tackle. Although
Derwin Gray can play
last
guard.
year, that's who I want to see. That would be then someone who'd be elevated from the practice squad would be is Derwin Gray. Is he able to play guard? I always had him listed as a guard and not a tackle, but the Steelers have him listed as tackle.
Okay. So, Bryan, you look at the right side. You look at Dotson, likely to get the start. You look at Chuks Okorafor, who I know that you hate. I mean, you hate his guts. You've cursed him out on this show many times.
I don't think it's a cursing, but I mean,
you don't like him. You don't think he's any good.
If what I said about Deontay Johnson means that I hate him, then that means bad. Bryan has Chuks Okorafor on his hit list that he has behind him that he can cross out before he
my Billy Madison, Steve Buscemi list.
People I want to kill.
Yes.
So that's a joke. If you're listening on audio, I don't want to kill you. So Bryan, can this patchwork offensive line get the job done? This is kind of concerning. It's all on one side.
It's going to be scary, but they can. Chuks. Here's the thing about Chuks. I think Chuks has proved that he's so much better in an actual NFL game, especially against the Los Angeles Rams last year, than he is in preseason. So I'll take that. We've had no preseason whatsoever. That's one of the reasons that you have a lot of more guys banged up, because that was their first real action. And, you got to think that way, though. But, Chuks has had a lot of time. He is somebody that battled back and forth. And I learned through the Zach Banner interview that we had in late June was that those guys are battlers. Those guys are best friends. And Chuks was going to see a lot of action in that Zach Banner role of last year as the tackle eligible. So he's going to, and he saw time 2 years ago in that tackle eligible role. So he's not as green as you would think. And he is not as much as the liability. Now, Kevin Dotson, you just don't know. He's a pure athlete. You saw him on draft day pulling a truck behind his back. I mean, he is a raw talent, but he has never even played an NFL preseason game. I mean, this is true green. This is true raw. We don't know anything about him. We just know how a lot of people were talking about him being, one of the best linemen in the draft because of his talent, but he went to Louisiana Lafayette. We just don't know anything about him, and he's getting thrown into the fire. You're going to think that the Broncos are definitely going to go after that right side of the line. You're going to think the Steelers are going to find a way to protect those guys the best they possibly can. They can do it. It's going to be tough. This is going to be more of a 2 a.m. game than you're going to see in a while with these guys being that green. If they win, it's going to be a lot uglier than you hope.
Dave, you played the line when you played. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, you got to roll with what you got. I mean, end of story. I mean, Chuks he's more known as the better pass blocker. Banner was known as the run blocker. And the reason it seemed like Banner won the job was he had made a lot of improvements in his pass blocking. So you're good. What makes me nervous is that it's two new guys right next to each other, but I'm going to reserve judgment because I am waiting because we know it's coming as of after this afternoon when he informed us that we're going to have a film room from one Jeffrey Benedict breaking down Kevin Dotson's plays that he made, those few handful of plays he was in week one. And I think I'll reserve my judgment to see what Jeffrey presents to us.
I tell you this, Chuks Okorafor, you can have concerns over him, and that's justifiable. I mean, he's in his third year, hasn't won a job yet, and he didn't win this job, but the fact that it went down to the wire tells me that what we saw from Zach Banner, you should probably expect similar from Chuks Okorafor, because if Zach Banner was that much better, it wouldn't have gone down to the wire. It would have been Zach Banner's the guy. He's going to be our starting right tackle, and we know this. And it wasn't. So
because look, Matt Filer won the job super fast last year. Everyone knew it was Filer before they played the first preseason game.
Yeah. So I think Chuks will be okay. And he has more starts under his belt than Banner did. So he's got the experience. He understands what's going to be expected of him. And I'm sure they're going to give them help with a tight end and chipping on their side and things of that nature. So Kevin Dotson, from everything I've read, and I'm anxious to see Jeffrey's film room as well, but everything you read about him leading up to the draft, which he was not even invited to the combine. Think about this. Was left out of the combine, gets drafted in the 4th round by Pittsburgh, and it could. I'm just going to say he's starting. Starting in his first professional game in his his first start is going to come in his second game. I mean, that's incredible. But he's a road grader. You want him going downhill. You want him going forward and just paving the way. And that's a good thing. That's not Wisniewski's strength. That's, I'm fine with having to road the pass blocking. That's not so much his forte. We'll put it that way. So
here, can I say one other thing?
Sure.
You were talking about the eligible, the tight end, the tackle that comes in to play the jumbo tight end job. Do you know who played that at the end of the 2017 season, if I do recall correctly?
Gerald Hawkins.
That would be one Gerald Hawkins.
I know that because Fiedner's interview today. Fiedner said that in his interview today.
Because I just looked at his snap counts, and he technically got a start out of it, where he only played 5 snaps on offense, but he got a start in week, 13 of 2017. That was, he was out 2016. He was injured the whole season. And that's just, and I think he was out for 2018 injured. So let's see, maybe he comes in if they need to use that role, but he's mainly there for the depth.
And Mark Tobin asked in the live chat, did the Steelers sign Gerald Hawkins? The answer is yes. They did.
Officially made that.
It was reported, and then Jerry Dulac from the Post-Gazette says they're not going to do it, but then all of a sudden they make the move when they put Banner on IR. They bring in Gerald Hawkins. I thought it was a good move. Yeah. A guy that knows the system. He's still in the league. You're not pulling someone off the couch. He was on the Houston Texans practice squad. So by all means, I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. But what? When you think about, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, just to clarify the rules. Some people might say, well, why didn't they just elevate a squad guy from their own team? Well, if they were going to bring him in to have more people, he had to come onto the roster for at least 3 weeks. So that's just, it doesn't mean that they think more of him than Derwin Gray, not necessarily. But if you're going to look outside somewhere, there's a lot of guys on practice squads. And if you really want to get better, if you're going to look somewhere else, that's just what you have to do. He has to go on to the 53.
Yeah. Okay. So, you think about Gerald Hawkins coming back to Pittsburgh. He was in Houston. The Steelers play the Texans next week. And you maybe think to yourself, could they pick his brain a little bit about the offense, the playbook? Possibly. Which then brings me to the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are playing the Denver Broncos, which you might as well call them Pittsburgh Mountain 2.0 West. Pittsburgh. Well, I don't even know what we're going to call them.
Someone said Pittsburgh Elevation. I saw on Twitter. I think they put on your Twitter.
But think about this. And guys, Bryan, if you'll help me out here, in case I missed one, Mike Munchak obviously has ties to Pittsburgh.
Yep.
They signed Mark Barron. He's injured right now. I'm not sure if he's going to play as a hamstring injury. Anthony Chickalo has been signed. Now, their coach, Nick Fangio, said I think he's signed because Nick Fangio said that there's a long shot that he would even play this week.
Gotcha.
And then your boy, Bryan, Deontay Spencer, right?
Deontay Spencer,
Am I missing someone else from Pittsburgh that's in Denver?
I do not think.
Vanette, if you want to count Nick Vanette.
Vanette, yep. Vanette. Oh, there's another one on the practice squad.
Another
guy on the practice squad. Patrick Morris, who they poached not poached. when he was up on the Steelers team when Pouncey had the suspension, they claimed him off waivers.
That's right.
Kept him last
that.
year. He didn't make the team this year, but they signed him to the practice squad.
So my question is this: I'm going to ask Bryan first. These players that are there now, especially Munchak, how big of an advantage is that for the Denver Broncos coming to Heinz Field this Sunday?
That's kind of a huge advantage because he knows he was the assistant head coach of this team at one point. He knows this team inside and out. He knows that line. He was the architect of that line. I mean, for many a year. So I would think that he knows the tendencies of the running game. But here's the thing. Whether you know the tendencies or not, you can get all of that on film. You don't have to have been there. Like bringing in Anthony Chickillo to be a spy, he's not really a spy. He wasn't there this preseason. Mark Barron wasn't there this preseason. So I think that's you actually get more of an advantage out of a Gerald Hawkins who's in Houston than the Broncos are going to get out of it. If they're going to get an advantage out of anybody, it's going to be Munchak just because he knows Mike Tomlin's brain. He knows no one knows Randy Fichtner's brain, really. Randy Fichtner doesn't know.
According to everybody
Fichtner's
else,
brain.
He was Randy Fichtner's brain while he was
quite possibly. But you know what? They've ways to counter that as well.
Dave, what are your thoughts? Advantage Denver here?
I don't know that it's an advantage. And like I said, to me, the Chickillo signing, I said it in the article that I wrote for it. I'm like, don't read that much into it that he played for the Steelers. Just when Denver had 3 healthy outside linebackers, and not even healthy because Chubb's coming back from ACL. Apparently he's on a bit of a snap count. They only had 3 guys to play outside linebacker. They need someone else. You got to go find someone. They went and found someone that they thought they liked. To me, I think the advantage of knowing anything more comes more with Munchak, even though it's another year removed than from any of the guys that they have.
Just from reading the transcripts of both Randy Fichtner and especially Keith Butler's interviews today, Butler was very open about the fact that they are going to have to change things. They're going to have to be creative. They know what Munchak knows about their defense. He's gone against them. He schemed against them for years in Pittsburgh. And so he says, we're going to have to do some things that we haven't done before. So that was interesting to me. But I like you guys said, I think that Munchak is going to be the one. But, you know, even looking week 1, the offense didn't look the same because, you know, you have Matt Canada's stamp with the motions and things like that. It's different. It's all different. Like Bryan said, so I'm not going to put too much stock into that. Last question here, guys. So James Conner, since we're sticking with injuries, and we'll go to a break after this segment here. Since James Conner is back and is a full participant, if you're Mike Tomlin or Randy Land, how are you dividing up the division of labor at running back starting on Sunday? Dave, we'll go with you first.
I think they're still going to go with Conner, but I think it's going to be more split than they normally would do, in my opinion. I think if they're really smart, you take the first half, you get both guys some carries, you get them both some drives, maybe in and out on some drives. And when it's all said and done, you're going to find out who your more effective runner is. And then that's kind of who you ride more.
Bryan, agree or disagree?
I agree that that's what they should do. Actually, but will they do that? Actually, you know what? I'm actually going to disagree a little bit because if it's me, and I'm not a knee-jerk guy, but I'm giving Benny Snell the start. I just don't believe in the sentimentality of, well, James, it's been his job all along. James was not effective before the injury. I mean, he had 6 yards on 9 carries or 9 yards on 6 carries. He was not good. And Benny Snell was electric. So I'm thinking it's time to, even send a message even more. You're not benching him completely, but maybe I want to see more 60-40 and the 60 being BSJ and the 40 being James Conner.
To me, I don't understand why fans, and this is not just a Steeler fan thing, this is just fans in general, why they immediately want to go from one end of the spectrum to the other in the drop of a hat. I would be happy if it's like a 60-40 split. That would be great. If you can keep, I understand that James Conner is injury prone. Okay. Everyone knows that. If you follow the Steelers and don't know that, you've been living under a rock since he was drafted. What I'm saying is that he can still bring value to the team. He can bring value in a pass blocking situation. He is good at picking up the blitz. I feel like he's better in receiving in regards to running routes. I think has better hands than Benny Snell. Benny Snell definitely does have things that he does better than James Conner right now. And Jeffrey Benedict will go to his grave telling you that if James Conner would get to play with Watt more, Derek Watt, you would see more success. James Conner runs well with the fullback. They didn't put Watt in really until the second half of week one. So maybe they switch it up a little bit. I think if the Steelers were smart, and in this case with Randy Fiedner, I'm never going to say that, yes, I think that's the same. If they can use both of these guys, it's not a bad thing. And if you go with the hot hand, you go with the hot hand. You know, if James Conner rushes for 113 yards and no touchdowns on Sunday, are people going to be upset? I'm not. He rushed over 100 yards. That's amazing. So I just don't think that people need to just go from one camp to the other or jump all on this bandwagon when we've all been saying it, or at least I have all offseason. A running back by committee, I think, is the best approach for this offense. It always has been. And so if they were to go to that, I think it would just make the offense more versatile. I think it would make them more dynamic. And I think ultimately it would just be better. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, here's the thing. I'm not saying put this guy on the shelf completely. I already said 60-40, but I do not want them to go back to 90-10 with Conner as the bell cow. And when he gets hurt, all right, okay, now we'll use you again, Benny Snell Jr. That's what I want. I don't want them to be, I don't want the bell cow. I want the Snell cow, and I'm going to take Bill Davis, put that in there. I thought it was funny. Bill put it in there. Very funny stuff. I mean, I'm not even asking for the Snell cow. All I'm asking for is a better division of labor, and that's a Mike Tomlin term. You don't need 90-10, and that's what we're going to get. That's what I'm afraid we're going to get again. Look, James Conner has value. James Conner cannot be 100% of the time your bell cow. Those days are over. You've got the number 3 rusher in the league in Benny Snell Jr. after 1 week. And he's maybe 2 yards away from being the number 2 rusher in the league. Use his talents.
And number 2 took almost twice as many carries. That was on 31 carries and only got 3 more yards than what Snell did. So,
okay, Dave, final thoughts before we take a break.
Final thoughts on that. Well, I want to say something about it because actually Wes brought it up in the live chat. It says, don't you know which one's better by now? I'm like, no, but Jeff said it perfect. It's the hot hand. And I mean, think about it. You could say that Juju Smith-Schuster's the number 1 receiver on the Steelers. Does he have to have the most yards every game? No. Sometimes based on different defenses and different matchups and different things make it better. And as our film guys have pointed out constantly, these 2 guys run differently. They do. And one might be better for one style and one might be better for the other style. So depending on your opponent and who's really getting going, there's nothing wrong with seeing who's the hotter hand. But honestly, if they don't give Conner as many carries, they're going to maybe use the excuse of protecting him. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right, so there you have it. When we come back after this break, we're going to talk about X factors, odds, predictions, fantasy football, and a little game called Over Under for this week 2 game against the Denver Broncos. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, we are back here. The Steelers preview part 2 for those listening on audio platform. We haven't gone anywhere if you're watching live on YouTube. I'm Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, joined with Bryan Anthony Davis, the podcast producer, and the other co-editor, Dave Schofield. Guys, let's talk about some X factors, shall we? We always do this. We do this every week. Who is the player? And we'll start with offense first. We'll do one offense, one defense. We'll start with offense first. A player that is the most pivotal the linchpin, so to speak, for the offense having success, the X factor this week. Bryan, we'll start with you. Who's that for you on offense?
I think it's going to be Eric Ebron. I know he was a sexy pick last week. I think they're going to make him more of a factor this week. So go with number 85. All
right, Dave, what about you?
I'm going to take the easy answer. It's 7. It really is. It all comes down to Ben doing his thing. I said it last week after the game. I really liked that, no interceptions, but not only that, it didn't seem like he had any balls that he threw that were really interceptable, if you know what I mean. It wasn't that pass that, the defense should have come away with that one. It seemed like he was very, very smart with what he was doing. And maybe it's understanding his mortality, after the surgery that, because Ben was just like, I'm going to fling it. I can do anything. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Maybe he realizes, you know what? I can dissect this and I can make the throws right. Then I can not give the defense a chance to get this ball. We'll see if he does it again in week 2. It might have just been a fluke in week 1. It might have just been the game plan of week 1, but I still think it all comes back down to Ben.
I'm going to really go out on a limb here. It's not really out on a limb, but it's going to be a different. It's not a skill position player. But yeah, I was reading Randy Fiedner's transcripts from his interview today, and he talked about how, not having DeCastro is bad, but if Pouncey wasn't there, then he wouldn't be able to sleep. So I'm literally going to say Marquise Pouncey is the X factor, because with two pretty green guys next to him on his right, it's going to be up to him to really make sure, not only leading up to the game, that they are prepared, that they know what's expected of them, but the calls in game, being able to communicate well, that's going to be really important. And so I'm going to say Marquise Pouncey, because let's go. I think that, I listened to our post-game show and Bryan brought up the low snap that he had. It was only 1, but still it's 1 too many for most fans. They typically, as a line, go as Pouncey goes. If he's getting to the next level, if he's, really pushing his defender around or occupying his guy and sealing him off when he should, they typically run well. I think it's going to be Pouncey, because if they can run the football, it's going to help run Ben Roethlisberger. If they protect well, obviously it's going to give them time. They have enough weapons on the outside, but I'm going to go with Pouncey, believe it or not. I think it's going to have a trickle-down effect all across the line of scrimmage. So what about defense? Bryan, we'll start with you again. What do you think about defenders that are X factors in this week 2 game?
You know what? I'm looking at Minkah Fitzpatrick this week. The secondary really needs to step it up. I think Drew Lock could really sling it. I love the fact that they went after Saquon Barkley last week, and you got to understand that they left the secondary, the defensive backs, on an island, but those guys have some chips on their shoulders this week. I think they're going to come out ready to fight. Melvin Gordon is not Saquon Barkley. He's dangerous, but he's not Saquon. So, they can play a little bit more of their defensive game with Minkah back there. I think the corners are just as important as well, but look for him to pull that unit up. They've got a lot of pride. They want to prove that it's just not the front 7 that is stirring the drink for the defense.
So you said, did you say one player, or did you say the secondary?
I said Minkah, but I said the other guys he's going to pull the other guys up, and they're important too.
Very good. Very good. Dave, what about you?
Well, I had one, but based on everything Bryan said, I'm going to change it to talk about something different. And I'm going to go ahead and change it. And I'm going to say TJ Watt. I think he had a great interception on a very heads up, smart, good timing play. I think he only had 1 tackle, but Bud Dupree came out and showed it off a lot last week. He really did. And if Denver watches anything, they're going to have to account for Bud Dupree. And anything of them looking at Bud Dupree should hopefully make it where they're looking less at TJ Watt, and now he needs to come back and make them pay. I mean, if they're really smart, they're still going to pay more attention to Watt than Dupree. But seeing what those other guys are doing and how much they shut down the run, I think Watt has a chance to maybe really, I don't want to say bounce back, because I thought he played great. They just, had a lot with him, and he's the guy. So let's go with TJ Watt.
I'm going to be similar with Bryan here. Okay, he said Minkah. I'm going to go a different route and just one player, and it's Terrell Edmunds. And he's the
See,
X
that was
factor.
going to be mine.
It's the X factor because, my gosh, how long is it? If you're Terrell Edmunds, you hear it. You see those mentions on Twitter. That you know what people are saying, that you are the weakest link in the defense. I mean, think about the defense is great. And maybe if you are the weakest link of a really great defense, you're not that bad. But who would want to be called the weakest link of anything? And he's being called that one guy. And there's only one guy that can actually go out and shut everyone up. And that's Terrell Edmunds. He has to go out. Get your hands on a football. I mean, seriously, you have had one interception since you were drafted as a first-round pick. I don't care what safety position you're playing. You've only had your hands on football once. Come on now. The Steelers, did not draft you in the first round to just be a tackler. They wanted a playmaker. Got to show that you're the playmaker, and that's why I think you're going to see a lot of teams, especially with a tight end like Noah Fant. Is it Fant or Fant? Fant. Like Noah Fant, they're going to test Terrell Edmunds. They're going to test his coverage ability. He's got to step it up. If he can prove himself, the rest of the defense is gravy, in my opinion. So he's the X factor for me. Go ahead, Brian. Do you have something to say?
First of all, when you're saying Fant, think of you're a big soda guy. I know, Jeff.
Yes,
so Fanta. Yeah. But no, you were talking about the weak link thing. You know, I mean, I hate that he hears that. I really do. Because I really root for him. But I mean, I even piled on him after he had 9 tackles the other day. I thought he was one of the weaker links that week. But I know how it hurts because I have been designated the weak link of the preview crew of you three. So it hurts me deep down, and I understand. So I mean, maybe I'm gonna give Terrell Edmunds a little more credence going forward, and we could be brothers in arms, me and Terrell.
Well, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, Jeff, you said everything that I was going to say when I was originally going to do Edmunds as my X factor. But when Brian said Minka, I said, you know what, I'll change up to a different position group. But that was exactly what I was thinking as well. So I think you're spot on there.
Well, Brian, you're my X factor.
Sometimes let me triple X factor. I know that.
No, you're not that. Not for me, at least. Okay. Let's play a little game of over-under, shall we? I had some time this afternoon, evening, and I wrote down some numbers, and I figured let's get people in the live chat involved, and we'll talk about it here as a group. Over-under on several different statistics for the upcoming game. Let's do some predictions. Over-under on Ben Roethlisberger touchdown passes. The over-under line will be at 2.5. You taking the over or the under, Dave?
This week, I'm going to take the under. I'm going to take 2.
Ooh,
I'm going to take two passes because I think if they're going to get 3 touchdowns, I think they're going to get 1 on the run this week. All
right, Brian, what about you? Over under 2.5.
I'm actually going to go over.
Really?
Yeah, I think they're slinging it. I think this could be a 50+ touchdown year for Ben again. I mean, it's just he's airing it out more and more. They're going to have some opportunities to get rushing touchdowns, but I'm giving them at least 3.
Dave, here's a stat for you to look up for some point, and that is in 2018 when the Steelers had the top red zone offense. How many rushing touchdowns did they have in the red zone that year?
Specifically in the red zone.
Right, because I'm curious. I think that Roethlisberger does his best damage in the red zone throwing the ball. I'm going to take the over. I think they're going to score 3 touchdowns, and I think they're all going to be through the air again. I think that Ben throws for 3, and so I will take the over. All right, next over-under statistic. Combined rushing yardage of Mr. Benny Snell and Mr. James Conner. We'll set that at 130 yards. Brian Anthony Davis, go first.
I'm going to go slightly under, and I'm going to say about a 115, 120.
Okay. Dave, over under 130.
130?
Yeah.
Let's see. Last week they were at 122.
That was all Snell. I mean, because Conner didn't hardly play.
Right. So I'm going to take the over. I think they're even going to run the ball a little bit better this week. I'm going to take the over.
I'm going to take the over too. I think that you're going to see both Conner and Snell play well this week, and I think I'm hoping that the fans are going to see that a running back by committee or riding the hot hand, that could actually work out for the Steelers and the Steelers offense. All right, next one. Turnovers. Over under 1. Are they going to turn the ball over?
Oh, you're not doing 0.5?
No, it's just 1. It's like yes or no. Bryan, we'll start with you.
The streak ends, my friend.
Hey.
Take the under.
Dave?
Yeah, I said that too. I can't remember if it was on Stat Geek or Scobro that I said I think the streak's going to end. The offense took care of the ball last week, and even when Snell put it on the turf, Juju was right there to grab it. The turnover was not on the fault of the offense, which now statistically makes me think the offense is due for one. Might be the problem, but I'm gonna go west. I'm gonna say it ends.
All this positive talk makes me realize they're going to turn it over. It's going to continue. We're going to 25 games. I don't know if it's an interception or a fumble, but I think they're absolutely going to keep it going. And so I'm going to take I'll take the push. I'll take the push. I think they turn it at once. All right, next one, takeaways. The defense taking the ball away. We'll put that line over under at 2.5.
2.5. Ooh.
Good, Bryan. You seem like you're ready.
I'm going under. They're getting 2.
Okay. What about you, Dave?
I was thinking they would get 2 or 3, and then you set it at 2.5. So that tells you that you probably set your line pretty good. Let's go over. Let's say they get 3. Maybe they get something, sloppy at the end or something like that.
I think it's an under. I think they get 2. It's still a good takeaway number, but I think it's under. What about sacks? We'll set the sack number at 3.5. 3.5 sacks. They had 3.
Well, Bryan predicted it perfectly last week. He said there'd be 3, and that's what there was.
So, Bryan, what do you say this week? 3.5 is the number. You taking the over or the under?
I'm still going under. I'm
really?
going with 3 again. Yeah.
Man, wait, really? Okay, that's fine. You got it right last time.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Dave?
I'll go over. I'll go 4.
I'm going to take the over. I'm going to go 4 as well. I think they're going to get to Drew Lock a few times. All right, last one. Defensive points allowed. 13. Over or under? Dave, we'll start with you.
Now, see, because now you're making me think of what my score prediction is going to be. So I think I'm going to go with. At 13. I'm going to go over. I don't think it's going to be much over, but I think it'll be over 13.
You think it's going to be over 13?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Bryan, what do you think?
I'm going over. I think they're going to give up 16 or 17.
Okay. I'm going to kind of ruin my prediction. I'm going to say push. I'm going to say I think they're going to give up 13 points even. There you go. All right, let's get into the odds. That's the end of over under. Hope you had fun with that. Let's get into the odds. Dave, what is the current line on this game? It was 7.5 the last I saw. Has that changed any?
That's what I'm checking. Whoa, that's not the consensus. Hold on. I wasn't on the right page. Yeah, I know. It's all falling apart. Yeah, it is 7.5. And
what's the over under?
And the over under is, that dropped some, 40.5.
Okay. Bryan Anthony Davis, brass tacks time. What's your prediction for the game?
Well, I've already made my prediction in print, but I have to change that a little bit because I just gave Ben Roethlisberger 3 touchdown passes earlier in the show. So I'm going to go ahead and change it in print since it's not out there yet. And we'll go ahead and say 24-19.
The 19 number. Okay. 24-19.
That puts him over.
So you got the over 24-19 and they would cover. No, they wouldn't cover. I'm sorry. You take Denver getting points then, right?
Yeah.
All right. And that is who you picked in our weekly picks. You picked Denver getting points, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You and Dave were the only people I think that took Denver getting points. Dave, am I correct in that?
You know what? Am I correct that it was 6.5 when we did?
I don't think so. I thought it was 7.
I think it was 7.5.
I can check real quick, but Dave, go ahead. What's your prediction?
Yeah, I had to look up some things to go with this, and I'm going with the Steelers win, and I'm going 21-16. and what I think they have to. I think Denver's going to have to go for 2 to try to cut it to 3, and they're not going to get it. And the reason is when the Steelers are favored by that much, especially against the Broncos, even though they don't necessarily lose the game, which sometimes they do, they're not always the best at covering. I actually looked it up. Under Mike Tomlin, when the Steelers are favored by a touchdown or more, they have actually not covered more often than they've covered. So that's kind of why I rolled with that one. And they haven't covered 5 of the last 7 times they've faced. 5 of the last 7 times they faced Denver, and they've been and they were picked to win. They haven't covered. So that's why I went with that.
All right. I've got and if you listen to my Let's Ride, I expand on this a little bit. But I have the Steelers winning 24-13 in a game that's very similar to what we saw in week 1. Sluggish start, maybe have to come from behind at one point or another, but I have 24-13 Steelers win. And so I think they are under, but I think they do cover. So that's what I have, 24-13. And you can check out all of our predictions. And that's not just the 3 of us. That's everyone that's on the podcast platform. That's other writers like Shannon, who was on the Scobro show this week, Shannon White. He will give his prediction. Jeffrey Benedict, Michael, even aren't the Australian guys doing it too?
Matty D and Marky P, and I think they're both in live chat, and they are doing them. They'll be recording their show in just right after this show. I know that, and they said, yeah, we're gonna turn them in right after that. So check out that. Yep, there's Matty saying we are, and I got to tell you guys real quick. It was really tough for me to not pick the Broncos in this game because I had that weird gut feeling since I saw this back in April on the schedule.
You picked them early on.
I've picked them in the preseason picks. I picked them to lose this game, but I'm switching back over because I'm buying what the Steelers are selling after that opening Monday night game.
There you go. Our Australian blokes from down under. They're in the live chat. I got to put this up here. This is an ongoing joke. The Chicago Pimp says Jeff Hartman hates Big Ben still. OMG. It's true. I hate him. I hate his guts. That's obviously a joke. All right. Last segment before we get to the trivia part of the show to finish everything out. Let's talk about some fantasy football. We've talked about this ad nauseum that we are all in a FanDuel league. We love daily fantasy, but some people, I think you guys are both in traditional leagues too. Yes.
Yeah.
Still,
I'm in 3.
Dave?
Yeah, I'm only in 1 this year.
I'm in none. 1. I only do the daily fantasy because I don't have time for that. Now
these are long time leagues though.
Mine's with my family. Like I got 2 nephews, a niece, a niece's husband, my brother. You know, it's a family league. We don't even regular draft. It's an auto draft. We just take whoever they give us and then we play and talk back.
For me, it's like Brokeback Mountain. I just can't quit you.
Oh my gosh.
Moving on.
All right. I can't believe you just did that. Jeez. Okay. We'll start with Dave so Bryan doesn't talk for a few minutes. Who's a fantasy must start? You know, a guy that you're like, if you have fantasy, you're going to want this player. If you have him on your roster in a traditional league, or if you're playing daily fantasy, it's worth the price. Who is that player for you in this game on Sunday?
I'm going to go with a player that actually is on my traditional fantasy team. I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster.
Okay.
I like last week. I was kind of torn. Do I go with him? Do I go with Keenan Allen? Do I go with Calvin? Was it Calvin Ridley for the Falcons?
Falcons.
Yeah, I didn't play Ridley, by the way. Oops, if you saw what he did. But I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to roll with Juju. Yeah, I'm going to keep rolling with Juju. I don't know if daily fantasy, if I'd spend the money I need to for him, but for traditional, I would. If you're still looking for value in daily fantasy, I still think James Washington is a decent play there too.
Okay. Bryan, what about you?
All right. Since Dave's taking more than one and took my James Washington pick, I'm going to go with my other one, Cortland Sutton, for the Broncos. Okay. I think
was limited in practice today.
Yes, but I think he's, after listening to Know Your Enemy last night, I drank the orange Kool-Aid with that. he's dangerous. I really think that they're going to be going his way. So I'll go ahead and say Sutton, but I'm loving Washington this week for a daily fan. I mean, just like Dave said, in daily fantasy, he's economical. I'm going to probably go out and grab him. I love, and Dave could say it with me, Grandpa Strong.
Grandpa Strong.
Hey, we need those t-shirts, by the way. We've got to make Grandpa Strong t-shirts.
Okay. I'll look into it. So for me, I'm looking at...
He won't.
No. I might. We'll talk about it. So I'm looking at this fantasy thing, and I am not sold on many offensive targets from in the passing game of the Steelers this year, because unless, Juju has 2 touchdowns in week 1, I feel like Deontay Johnson could be that in week 2. I feel like it could be James Washington in week 3. It could be Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron in weeks 4 and 5. I just don't think that there is that one guy, and they haven't had that one guy since Antonio Brown left, that you're like, I can trust him. You know who you can trust? The Steelers defense. I mean, let's be honest. The Steelers defense, even in daily fantasy football, if they don't give you if they don't give you double-digit points, it's an awful day for them. I mean, you think about the sacks that they accrue, the takeaways that they get. They typically they typically keep opponents' points down, which gets you more points. If you're looking for someone that you're like, man, I just need someone that's going to get me points. I don't think there's a defense out there that's more trustworthy, in my opinion, especially going into week 2 against Drew Lock at home. I really like that defense. What about guys, someone you're like, do not play this person? Who's that, Bryan? Who you benching?
James Conner.
Okay.
I've benched him in traditional leagues, 2 of my traditional leagues.
All right. What about you, Dave?
Melvin Gordon. Don't play anyone against the Steelers defense running the ball until someone actually does something. How'd you see what happened to Saquon?
Vance McDonald. Again, he might be that guy that catches a touchdown or 2. He might have a stiff arm heard around the world again, but you can't go into a game expecting that. You're just going to be disappointed. It's just like last week I started Rob Gronkowski thinking that Tom Brady's going to just pick up that connection again. He had like 2 catches for 5 yards or something. It was a stink fest. So I would say Vance McDonald, just let him go. Let him go. What about a sleeper? Real quick. What about a sleeper pick? Someone that you're like, you know what? You might be able to find someone else, but this guy might churn out some points this week with this opponent. Bryan, who do you have?
Let's go Chase Claypool.
Okay. All right, good sneak up, Dave.
See, you called it right. With the Steelers offense, they've got so many guys to spread the ball around. You basically have to guess right each week.
Yeah.
And it makes it really tough. So let's go Eric Ebron.
There you go. I'm going to go with Ben Roethlisberger, because when you look at Ben Roethlisberger early, you're like, yeah, do I want to play him? He can turn the ball over a bunch. I think him being back at Heinz Field, I think going against a defense that's going to have some young secondary players. No A.J. Boye because he has that torn labrum in his shoulder. He's not playing. I think that Ben Roethlisberger could put up some numbers. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 500, but he could put up some touchdowns. I think it'd be good. So there you go. Let's get to some trivia to finish out the show. Dave, what do you have?
All right, real quick. This is just interesting. We're looking at the Steelers, we're looking at the records, and we're looking at the playoffs. Okay. When was the last time the Steelers won their opening game and did not make the playoffs?
They had to win it, so not a
They had
tie.
to win the game.
Okay.
Win the game. Yeah, they had to win. Win the game. Start 1-0. If you want to, I'll give you a hint.
Don't give me a hint. No,
Okay.
No hint.
Did they win 2009?
2012.
Okay. The last time.
It was 2009.
Okay.
And because the hit was going to be, it was in overtime when they beat Tennessee in overtime to start the season. So now let's see how important this game is.
I like it.
How important is it to go 2-0? When's the last time the Steelers started 2-0 and didn't make the playoffs?
And did not make the playoffs.
What was the year that he said they'll unleash hell? Didn't they start off really well that year?
That's 2009.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was Unleash Hell.
They
started out like 7-3 or 6. It was 6-3. So I know it's not 2006. So my gosh, you're going back into the 90s. So I'm going to go ahead and say 98.
I don't know.
98 was a great guess. It was actually 99.
Oh,
when they thrashed Cleveland in their very first game, 43-0, and then beat the Ravens the next week, and then the Steelers only won 4 more games the rest of that season.
Yeesh.
So here's what's interesting though. Since 1990, this is just now a little information for you. Since 1990, the Steelers have started 2-0 10 times. They have made the playoffs 8 of those times. And they've made the Super Bowl 4 of those times. Every time they went to the Super Bowl since 1990, this is how far back I could actually do this with the records, that they, every time they went to the Super Bowl was after they started 2-0. So this is a big week, big win.
Yeah.
Got to go 2-0. Let's do this.
Good, Bryan.
I was just going to say, and in 1974, when they won their first Super Bowl, they were 1-4 to start that season.
Yeah. But just to let you know, Bryan was correct because the other season was 98. It was 98, 99 was the 2 times since 90 that they started 2-0 and didn't make the playoffs.
All right, guys. Last final words. Bryan, we'll go with you. Final words of the show before we call it a show.
I said it last week. I've said it all along. This is a special team. This has been a weird year. This has been a disruptive year, but this is a special team. And I think that this home opener, even without fans in the stands, it's going to make things more normal for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So all I'm going to say is I'm feeling great about this team right now. And I hope I'm not jinxing it, but I'm loving what I'm seeing. And let's celebrate next week.
Dave, go ahead.
I think the Steelers are going to come. I would love for them to prove my pick wrong. I would love for them to more than cover, since they're, 7.5 points is a lot. That's the problem. I would love to see them come out and more than cover, put this game away. But let's start off on the right foot. Okay. Let's start this game off in the right way. And let's actually have 48 players active for the game. That would be nice. So if the Steelers could do that, I'll start much more happy for the game, and hopefully they can roll on.
I'm hoping they don't, because I just want to see that vein. That
head's going to explode. The only thing that's worse is if you bring up the Wildcat after the Steven Nelson fumble against the Bills last year.
Hey, I had like a 5-hour ride home in the snow hearing about that Wildcat.
All right, last thing for me is similar to what Dave said, but my gosh, can the Steelers start off a little faster this week, please, offensively? Randy Fiedner, get your head out of your rear end. Ben, take the reins if you have to. Go. I would love to see him do a little hurry up to start the game, because it's clear that Roethlisberger is more comfortable in that setting. Read the defense, see what's best, and do it. I just cannot stand to see these 3-and-outs, run, pass, run, pass. Okay, it's the second quarter. Now we'll warm up. Let's go. Let's get a good script. Let's get a good plan. You have tape on Drew Lock. You have tape on the Broncos. Nick Fangio is not a first-year head coach. These are not fresh coordinators. My gosh, let's get off to a better start. It's sickening watching this team start, and that goes all the way back to 2018. That's not like, last year was awful. We know last year was awful. It's time
when Munchak had some say in what was going on in the
That's
open
true
script.
too. That is true too. So there you have it. It's right. You're right. So we'll see. Big week this week, as everyone said. It's also a big week at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. I swear we have everything that you could ever want in a website for your Pittsburgh Steelers needs. Multiple film rooms. We've got staff picks. We've got commentary. We've got breaking news. You name it, it is there. I swear. We have done the best, the three of us here on the show, to make it a true one-stop shop for all things Steelers. If you're getting something from somewhere else, let us know, because we want to do it. We want to do it better. So keep that in mind. And then also your audio platform, wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Anchor, Stitcher, even Pandora. Search Steelers, search Behind the Steel Curtain. You'll find us there. So guys, thank you very much for your time. Everyone in the live chat on YouTube, you all were fantastic today. We had a nice crowd, over 120 people. Awesome. Black and gold. Here we go. Make sure you join for all the shows, but really be back for the post game, because that's always fun. So take it easy. We'll see you next Thursday as we prepare for the Houston Texans. Take it easy, everyone. Be safe.
Hey.